Hello and welcome to the Free Cheese episode 502. I am your Joe Dix, joined by Mark Augustiniak.
Hey.
Matt Selner.
Hello.
The Free Cheese is a weekly video game podcast about video games, brought to you once a week by thefreecheese.com. This week, we are not adding a new game to thefreecheese.com/the list, as we do every other episode during season 11, but instead, we're taking a little dive into the golden era. Which golden era? My golden era. Your golden era. His golden era. Specifically, me, Matt, and Mark. But listener, feel free to share his or hers or yours or theirs golden era. Podcast at thefreecheese.com is the email address. You can tell us what your golden era was and what it means to you. We'll define some of the parameters of the golden era here. We're each going to share a series of years that we self-defined as our golden era. And then we'll talk about some of the titles, the platforms we owned or played on during that time that were important. And I've got some fun little trivia questions to carry us along. Are you two excited to share your golden era? Do you think we have crossover in our golden eras?
No. Me to you guys, no. You two, maybe.
Really?
You know, I think if there is crossover, it's probably going to be little.
Huh.
I guess is little.
I'm intrigued. I'm curious to see where we do land. There was a moment where I had a worry that we would just have the identical set of years and probably all the same games, but yeah, I guess we'll find out. And listeners, what we did was before the show, picked numbers through a robot and had robot determine the order in which we're going to share our lists and our eras. So the order is Matt, Joe, Mark. We'll go in that order. I think what we'll do is give Matt time to run through everything and name the games. However you've prepared it. I did, for the listener, I left this kind of open to interpretation intentionally, so our approach might be a little varied between the three of us. But run through your bit. I'll run through my bit. Mark runs through his bit. And then I've got some other questions that we can sort of ask and talk through in the end once we kind of have revealed everything. So let's start and jump in. Matt, when was your golden era of video games?
So I'll start with kind of how I define it, because I think this is important to lead into when I say the years here. For me personally, there's always been pockets of video games and generations of consoles and whatever that have great games and time spent in different ways with different video games. You think back to SNES, I spent a lot of time on Mario World, Mario Kart, things along that nature, PlayStation 1, N64, No Mercy, I've talked at length about that game, Triple Play Baseball is the baseball game for me around that time, Crash Bandicoot, PS2, Jak and Daxter, the start of the Guitar Hero saga for me, Mario Kart Double Dash is along the rails on that. In the GameCube, we know how much I love Baby Park and Double Dash. You get into the Wii, which is the start of that next generation, because PlayStation 3 did not have one job, let alone two jobs to afford a PlayStation 3 at the start of that generation. So, that's kind of where Guitar Hero Saga Part 2 takes place for me, is on that console. But of course, you got Wii Sports, WarioWare is a part of that. But my golden era is not actually based on the games. I think it's based on me and my availability and how I see video games And that's why my golden era starts the day I land on a college campus and ends the week of October 2nd, 2016. So, for those that don't know...
Go ahead. I'm offended already, but go ahead.
What do you mean you're offended?
Why does it end right as you join the podcast?
Because, Joe, I looked into a little bit. Of I didn't know what to I didn't know where to start with this golden era thing. Because, like I said, there's pockets of games everywhere. I was looking at the comic book, how comic books do their eras. This could be wrong. This is from 2 websites, so, and the first website I didn't quite understand what they were trying to tell me. So the second website, which might have been some dude's blog, don't know. Anyway, they define it as kind of like the start on mainstream. You kind of get your foundations, and it's starting to hit mainstream for a lot of people. The silver era is when it is mainstream, but it's getting a little bit more creative, and the foundations have already been laid out. So, yes, don't be offended that the golden era stops at the podcast. It's just, I think it's a good definitive landmark to end my golden era.
No, I like that.
Yeah.
So why does it start with going to college?
I think it's time. I think it's a new, I don't want to say new start. That's so cliche. I have friends and stuff that went to Salisbury from high school with me. It was, yeah. But, I'm away from my parents. It's a new territory. You do make a bunch of new friends. That bullshit from high school where there's cliques and stuff, that no one cares once you get on a college campus. Yeah, you have your cliques, but no one cares about who you're friends with or whatever.
Yeah, the lunch table
kind
of thing. Yeah.
So, it's a different territory, and then I just had so much time to play video games, and it kind of became as time goes along, I wouldn't say maybe like first day freshman year is my medium of choice, but I usually try to split my time between TV, movies, and video games, and try to stay in tune with pop culture. But along the line somewhere is when I just kind of pick video games to be my definitive medium for fun, interactive experiences, to get my mind off of things, stress reliever, to do something when I'm bored. I kind of find myself more with a controller in my hand than I do a movie on my laptop, or, running through and binging a TV show or anything like that. Of course, I'll always watch sports, and, I'll watch the occasional movie here and there. I'd still I still have my franchises that I like. But I think at this point is when I make that definitive pivot. And yeah, I just, you tend to make friends with people that have similar interests. My roommate, actually most of my roommates throughout the time had similar interests in playing video games. I mean, we'll play different stuff. We have different consoles and things like that. But no, I think that's just when I dive in. I think I got around with video games. It wasn't like I only play 5 games and all of a sudden this catalog expanded. But my catalog does expand a little bit, especially the last couple years of college when I worked a summer job and I had a little bit of disposable income to try out some experimental things. And that's where games like Mark's Hotline Miami come into play, Journey come into play, stuff I probably wouldn't have tried, like Red Dead Redemption. Not much of a Western person, but Red Dead is in there. And the only reason I tried it was because it was always told to me as Grand Theft Auto with cowboys. And I like Grand Theft Auto, and, there it is. I have some fun moments with games that I did play, like the OG Modern Warfare 2, not the one from this year, the OG one. Nights upon nights upon nights of just playing multiplayer. And I would play with my roommate, and we would play Search and Destroy, and when he would if one of us died, we would always hear the death comms from the whole lobby, so you can kind of halfway cheat if you're playing Search and Destroy. It made it a new way. Before I was just playing online in my room. This was a little bit different. Having the direct person in your room is almost like couch co-op again, but with 2 systems and 2 TVs. Freshman year, we had this great run on Madden 11 where it was a couple of us. We did a shared franchise with fantasy drafts, and it was between classes for like 2 weeks. We would hop onto my PlayStation where the save was and just turn and go and play our game for that week, and then so that way we could just keep advancing the weeks. My PlayStation used to be on for like 6 hours at a time throughout some of those days, just baking good and through the season or weeks of the time through the season. So that was fun. That was like a dorm like thing. There was like 3 of us, but by the end of it kind of became like popular where people were coming in to watch like the season games for someone because it was just something to do. And then like kind of after college, I don't get a job right away, and then my first job is part-time. So it's still a lot of time, and I have disposable income, and my student loans aren't due back yet, so we got a lot of disposable income. And so, like, now we start playing, we start buying some stuff that I wouldn't have bought before. I know The Last of Us is technically in my last year, but that's around that time. It was my first summer working when that game came out, and, that was an easy day one purchase. I remember being at the pool, calling my mom, navigating her through the PlayStation 3 XMB that I still know like the back of my hand to download The Last of Us, so that way it was ready for me when I came home from the pool that day. Then that led into the nights and nights of playing that multiplayer, which I still rave as one of the best multiplayers ever. Games like The Walking Dead. I don't think I would ever play pick your own adventure game like that, but man, did that get me to enjoy, or I don't know, enjoy is a good word for that game, but care about adventure games. And then I play some other stuff, like Mass Effect 2. That's another game we've added to the list. Little game called Deus Ex Human Revolution. It's a game I play in college because I have time all of a sudden. I buy Uncharted 3. BioShock is another one that, I know first-person shooters, I've always seen them as military shooters, or usually play the military ones, but then this one is something completely different and tells a story. NHL games didn't suck. Oh my god, the amount of time I spent playing NHL games, because I actually enjoyed playing them. And, I guess, in the midst of it, somewhere along the lines, because I have a PS3, Metal Gear Solid 4, it becomes, I don't know if my first playthrough of it is in college, but definitely I play through it again because I had a roommate that had it, so I would play through it again, and I just kind of solidified that franchise as like one of the most bonkers and awesome one that I would play, and yeah, I think that more like the time and my exposure, and the last part of this is like my senior year, like I get so hyped for, sorry, it's my junior year. I get so hyped for the new console reveals, like the PlayStation 4 reveal. That summer it leads into I'm home for the Xbox stuff, but the Xbox reveal and going into E3, that's when I started listening to podcasts about video games for the first time. And then I get so entrenched, and leads up to that second week the week of October 2nd, 2016. So I don't know if it's necessarily games. I think there's going to be games all throughout your life that you can pick. Oh, that's the best era, or oh, that's the best era. I think it's the experience and being able to just live in it in a period of time that I probably will never have again. I won't have that much available time again to just live in it anymore, being an adult.
Yeah, I think one thing about that era for you too is, you didn't say it, but just knowing you and where you were at, like that was when you got your PS3, right? Like that was, and it.
No, I got my PS3 like the Christmas. So I graduated in 2010. I think I got my PS3 Christmas 09 because I got it with Modern Warfare 2 same day.
But it just that like feels like the beginning of a new era. Like you were starting that generation, like you know what I mean. But yeah, I like that range. I did not expect you to go that range. I think that fits very well, especially with
my favorite part.
Yeah,
is when you said it was my Hotline Miami. It's not anyone else's. I own that game.
No, well, like, I played it once and had a great time with it, but, like, it did not become my, like, I go and play this and can beat it in an hour kind of game. You know, it was just a bonkers good time for, like, a weekend.
Yeah.
I just thought it was funny. I appreciate it.
Yeah. We'll move into my golden era, which... from the from the years 1998 through 2001, at the ripe age of 9 to 12 is where I was in this sweet spot. So this is right in the middle end of a console generation, on the edge of the PlayStation 2, the Dreamcast, GameCube, Xbox. That whole generation is just ahead of us. For me, primarily, the PS2 was the thing to be excited about. My relationship with Sega had soured after there was no Sonic game on the Sega Saturn. By the time the Dreamcast came out, it was a neat thing that I didn't quite understand what to do with. I'd spend the next 20 years wishing I'd made different choices. But at the time, not there. GameCube, I remember being extremely, like, infatuated with. It still is, like, one of the most enigmatic consoles to me ever. It's just such a weird, cool thing. I know it does not, like... Back then, we were looking at, like, PS2 and Xbox as cool, and, you know, the edge... But, like, GameCube, prior to its release and me becoming a teenager, was like the coolest idea of a thing. But going back to like 98 and where we were there, for me, this was the era when I felt excitement and wonder with every new game that I'd play, with every magazine preview I read. It felt like there were these new worlds to explore, and more we had different ways to experience games. I started to... I allowed myself then to get lost in things in a way that I just don't think you inevitably lose that ability, right? Is after this chunk of time in my life, I started to follow a wider series of interests. I grew older. I had less time available to just play games. So this is like that last little pocket. It felt like this era was a time when playing games was a group activity more so than ever. I know we have so many other ways to do that now, as, you know, the internet has become a thing, and, you know, we make our decisions now with what we do with our free time, but often we don't choose to spend it with a whole bunch of people in a big, like, not often, right? But every game, or almost every game on my list, is a game that I played with at least my brother, and if not just him, then multiple of friends or whoever. Even single player experiences on my list usually were played with somebody nearby as an active participant, whether calling out to something on the screen, taking over when, you know, swapping when you die or something like that. It's just what it was. This era was the back half of the first foray into 3D gaming, so teams were still experimenting with what they could do. There were no standards set, really, in that regard. Like, there wasn't an expectation of what a 3D game should feel like or what type of control scheme you should have. So developers, I feel, were creating what they felt was good for the game they were making, rather than trying to force what we expect a system to be, or a feeling of a game that would inherently just change the way their game is. You know, I feel like today, sometimes you might have games that lose their sense of purpose or identity in the process of QA testing, and like, well, why isn't run push in with this button? You know, like those things that can maybe get distilled in a weird way. I also loved that games still had a remarkable series of differences per console and handheld. While I love the advent of the Switch and the modern era where everything can be on every device at all at one time, it was so much nicer and more interesting to have designs games designed for the hardware in front of you that tailored that, specific thing, whatever it was, right? They met the hardware specs. Now it's how can we meet the max specs across 5 platforms rather than how can we tailor something that fits this thing? And it's something I think, especially with like the loss of the 3DS, we really are going to lose out on. That kind of unique stuff. The internet has changed video games in many ways, obviously, but I think a big thing that we lost with the addition of the internet is we have so much more knowledge and insight into how games are developed. Not even just like if you want to learn how to do that yourself and now you understand the basics of it. I mean, like, we know what goes into making every game before it comes out, right? We know the process. Things are told to us over and over again. Within or ahead of moments of a game's release, we end up seeing everything about it. Usually after months of drip feeding content that reveals more and more of the game. We're always seeing the sauce before it comes out. One of the most exciting things today is when a game is announced and released within a few months, so we can skip that long tail of promotion and anticipation, which is kind of weird to say that, because also at the same time, I used to love like seeing a tiny screenshot in a magazine years before a game would come out, and then you'd spend years wondering what it could be. So I know I'm being a little, contradictory in that statement, but at the same time, like, I think now we get so many things that are like, I don't know, like Zelda's out, right, in a couple weeks, and like, how much do we know about that game now? I'm sure there's probably so much more.
Dude, how many number of trailers did we get for Deathloop by the time that game came out? How many explain trailers?
Great. And that's a game that you were excited about when first announced. And by the time it came out, you did not play it, never wanted to play it, never wanted to see it again ever, because of how much it just got crammed out there. And I think that's a great example of what I'm talking about. Like, it was one thing, especially now, like, I collect a lot of old magazines now, so going through them, like, if you look through magazines of if you read like 3 issues of whatever from 3 consecutive months, you're going to end up seeing a lot of the same ads. And, it's like, it was always there, right? Like this like persistence and people trying to push their game. And I get it. Obviously that's what advertising is there for, but it's so different now in an era where like everything is competing for your attention. And it's just like, here. Like, you get a thing in your YouTube feed, you get a press release in your email, you get whatever. Then like from a company you didn't even expect that you were on their mailing list, they're telling you about, like, it's too much. I think the closest thing that we do have today, or had, in terms of that like exciting anticipation that a screenshot in a magazine could bring us, was like the Smash character reveals. Like, just kind of like that perpetual feeling of like, who's next, like who's going to be in it, what's going to happen. Sadly that's gone now, and I hope that they can maybe make a Mario Kart that does that. Anyway, the games of my era, I'll run down. I ended up with a bit, so I'll swiftly move through them. I should say that the platforms of this era for me that I was predominantly playing on were, I still had, for the most part, up until the very end, I had my Nintendo Entertainment System and my Sega Genesis. So I was playing those throughout all of this, and the small collection of games that we had, plus renting that console or those 2 games. You could still rent those games readily at Blockbuster and some of the other smaller shops. But I was playing a lot, and then of course had Game Boy, but we'd also get Game Boy Color in this era. But predominantly it was Nintendo 64 and Sony PlayStation were the 2 main platforms. So looking at 1998, we did get Pokemon Blue that year. I didn't call that one out. Like, I did, but I didn't really, because spoilers, I've got Pokemon Gold on this list, and I think that one's a stronger contender for whatever. Blue was like, how could this even be, right? Like, that was an incredible, obviously, cultural touchstone. and I still love it. But like when I think back to playing Pokemon, I remember Gold more than I remember Blue. But 1998 for me started with a little game called Wetrix, which I stumbled upon. I remember we were at Best Buy. We noticed that it had Tetris shapes on the box. It was lower price than the rest of the games. It was budget release. So it was like something easy to like, yeah, we'll grab that. Why not, right? And I think the idea with Wetrix 2 is that because it was sort of Tetris-esque, I mean, it wasn't at all, but because from the box it appeared to be Tetris-esque, my mom figured she might play it. So it was an easy, like, yeah, let's get it. I don't know if anyone's played Wetrix, but I really liked it. I liked the music. It's got this weird, like, melancholy and, like, just depressing overtone to it. I don't know if it's because it's like always raining in the game or something, but it's got this like bright, colorful art style, but then this like really melancholic overtone. It's a weird like juxtaposition of two emotions, but I love it, and it still sticks with me. Like when I think of the N64 and I think of playing games, I think of Wetrix, and I still like anytime I plug in my N64 or do anything with it, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna play some Wetrix. And I managed to pick up a copy of it for Dreamcast because they made a Dreamcast port of it. So, another one in '98 was The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, which was probably my first big boy game. And that's big boy with a TM at the end of it, of course. But I remember feeling like I was playing a real video game when I played that. Like, I felt like I was on an adventure as Link, who then was called Joe. I don't know if you knew that or not, but like that was like and it was a big boy game. It had so many things to do. It had so many like, I mean, you know, you go through every temple and you have to collect all these things, and like the evolution of time within the game, like that was, you know, something incredible. And I felt like, you know, I did something when I beat that game. In '99, Super Smash Bros. Released, and it was the first time I remember learning about the wider world of Nintendo's properties. I loved trying out all the different characters. I loved the sense of adventure in single-player modes, despite them being sort of fleshed out in later sequels. There was still like a core like fun you could have with that. I remember really just like trying to set up all sorts of scenes and pause the game and just see what our characters were doing and weird stuff, like seeing what happened. Like it's always fun to like throw the Pokeball and then pause it just before it came out, just to like try and guess really quickly together, like who's gonna come out. Like just this time, again, going back to the time available to us that we had to just waste time just pausing and zooming in on things and looking around the backgrounds to see what some of the little actions were happening or animations. Which also, of course, in '99 would lead us to spend hours and hours and hours and hours and hours in Roller Coaster Tycoon. But I think Roller Coaster Tycoon is a game that I love games like this that have a set campaign that you can follow, but you also just have the opportunity to get lost in the systems available to you. And Roller Coaster Tycoon did that super well. Like, here's the tool set. Do what here's the thing. If you want to follow and do a thing, you can, but just do your thing. So, I would make themed parks and try and like match up color schemes. The one that stands out like the longest was I made a Batman themed park that had rides that matched the color schemes of all the characters. Of course, I had like twin coasters that would go up, and they were Batman and Robin. So it was a black and yellow, and then a red and green, and they were whatever. And then, you know, a decade later, I would go to Six Flags where they have all the Batman stuff, and was incredibly disappointed at how lacking they were compared to all of my. They're still fun, but they were not. I know a Batman theme park, right? I think something special about Roller Coaster Tycoon is that they did it right the first time, and the sequels have never quite matched that original touch. Where I feel Spyro 2, Ripto's Rage, did actually outdo its predecessor. Ripto's Rage stands out to me specifically because I remember playing it on Thanksgiving morning that year and being super stoked to play it because I knew that like I had a free day that day to do nothing but eat and play this game. So I got the whole day to play because all I wanted to do was play this game, and I had no excuses to not play it. And I was pushing to go for 100%. And it's the first time I remember getting 100% in a game with no cheats, no anything, and feeling like, hey, I did this. That was a big moment, I think. 2000, we get The Sims, which was the first game I remember playing that felt like it had consequences that mattered. The choices I was making affected the characters, how their lives were playing out. And I liked seeing all of that, but I also loved that I could just use Rosebud, get 1,000 simoleons at a time, and just deck my house out with all the stuff I wanted to do. Perfect Dark came out in 2000, which was the successor I wanted in GoldenEye. We, of course, covered that on the list last year. But with Perfect Dark, like, I played it endlessly. I loved watching the stats build in the multiplayer mode. Like, the fact that it was, like, keeping this persistent record of everything that me and my brother and our friends were doing in that game was great. And I know that Season 10 proved maybe otherwise. But at the time, I loved the single-player campaign. And I thought it had a good story that I was curious to follow along with. 2000 also brought us Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, which I love the original, but I had the original on N64, where the soundtrack was limited to that very short, different style. But this just was everything more that I wanted in a sequel. It was more music, more stages, more Tony Hawk. Adding manuals created combo opportunities that emphasized building the perfect run, the perfect route around a level. And I just remember, like, that was just, it just became, like, my muscle memory of playing games is never going to forget Tony Hawk input stuff. I remember getting the secret level on that, turning on moon gravity, and just getting million combos over and over again for hours while listening to Power Man 5000. The aforementioned Pokemon Gold, which, hold on, sorry, I didn't write down the year on that one, but that was also 2000, Game Boy Color, and it was another sequel I felt like really built on its predecessor. It was the last time I felt fully, like, enraptured with Pokemon, and all of the, like, having new monsters added to it felt exciting. Like, now I still get curious and whatever, and fine, but, like, that was the last time where it was like, what? There's 100? Because back then you felt like you were discovering them with the professors themselves, right? You were like, there's 100 more of these things. And also now, in hindsight, that they were all designed originally together for the most part. So they felt more cohesive than I think adding the new ones has. Like, it all felt like these are all part of this world. And I just loved, like, there's so much game in there. Like, I remember just spending days and hours and weeks hunting for the 3 dogs just all over the lands to see what happened, and, like, freaking out when you'd find any of them pop up. Plus, of course, there's the whole culture around Pokemon and everything. Playing the games, the card games, collecting, and going to conventions and all the stuff that you do. In 2001, here's where we're at. GameCube's coming out. PS2's already out, and I'm getting a PS2 at this point. With the GameCube coming out, Luigi's Mansion makes my list. And I'd play Luigi's Mansion. I didn't own a GameCube, but a friend of mine did. I was over... If he wasn't at my house, I was at his house all the time. This is just where we were in this era, in, like, late 5th, early 6th grade. And he got a GameCube, he got Pikmin, and he got Luigi's Mansion. And I remember playing both of them, and it was another one of those things where, like, these games just tasted like GameCube. Like, they just had their own specific thing about them that you couldn't do anywhere else. You were never going to do anywhere else. I think, like, even Mario 64, as, like, Nintendo and Nintendo 64 centric that game is, so many other games came out on 64 that felt not similar, but, they're in that vein that, like, Mario 64 still has its identity, I think, but it started to lose some of that as you got more 3D platformers, and that wasn't just the 3D platformer. But Luigi's Mansion and Pikmin still, to this day, just taste like GameCube games. Like, there's nothing like them, and there's nothing as evocative of GameCube as those two games for me. So those are right there. And then we'll end it with PlayStation 2's Grand Theft Auto 3. And the things I remember at the time was, like, I got that game. And it was like, whoa, dude, I have a PlayStation 2. I have this game. Is there anything I can't do? Unlocking the different islands in New York, Liberty City, was like, whoa, like this huge map that seemingly never ended, all these little places, these hidden spots. You can get that car, like all of the things you could do in Grand Theft Auto, this huge, crazy sandbox that just, I could do whatever I wanted. I finally felt like a grown-up, and then that was the end of the golden era, because that was it. At that point, every game I played following Grand Theft Auto 3 was just another Grand Theft. I mean, I played Vice City, I played San Andreas, all the other stuff that came directly as sequels. But then I think games changed after Grand Theft Auto 3 a lot, where everything needed to do what that game was doing and was just more of that. It also lines up right at that sweet spot where, like I mentioned in my opening little bit, like I start going in different directions. I start getting different hobbies and different interests and doing different things with my time and working. It was like 3 years after my golden era ended that I had my first job. Like all of this stuff kind of happened and coalesces with me moving toward high school, and then you just have inevitably less and less free time. But it's still like, that was a nice send off, I think. And I liked the bookends of like Wetrix and Ocarina of Time with Grand Theft Auto 3. Sorry, I think I went a little longer than I anticipated, but
all good. No, I had a feeling when you said 2001 we were going to end on that certain game.
It just, it was like the one, right? And then that was it. You don't go backwards from that. Playing that was what solidified me not getting a GameCube, because I wasn't a baby anymore, Matt. I was a big boy.
Did laugh when you said that, things on GameCube you couldn't get anywhere else, and I forgot to mention my little build-up RE4 in the PlayStation 2 era.
Yeah.
Ooh.
What was Mark's golden era?
So, I have a weird way of looking at it as well. In a way, you could say I have 3 golden eras, but don't worry, I'm not going to go through all 3 of them. There's like the phase of my life where it's like, yes, I'm playing these games, but I don't know what I'm doing exactly. But it's just fantastic just to be playing, and you're not really thinking about it. There could be another phase where like, it's simple enough to where you do know what you're doing, but the games are very limited or something. Maybe there's only like maybe 5 that you rotate between or something like that. So that's not that interesting to me. So I think my golden era is when I feel cognitive enough to understand how to play a video game as well as enjoy what I'm playing at the same time. And the best way to measure this time, it's funny because where you ended is kind of where I'm starting, Joe. It's basically from between 2000 to 2006. Or you can just say how long G4 aired for or something like that. Or, when did America Online start to decline? Is pretty much when it ends. So, at this point, the PS2 came out, Xbox is right around the corner, GameCube is in there somewhere, and I love a lot of games on the 64, but I feel like I didn't really know what I was doing for half of the things I was playing, unless it was like Star Fox 64 or Duke Nukem. If it wasn't that, I was playing a game, but I didn't really feel like I was fully embracing everything it had to offer. But so I felt more of that when I got my GameCube. And for those that don't know, I am one of 3 brothers, and each of us just so happened to get one of these systems in this console generation. So, oldest had the Xbox, middle had the PS2, I had the GameCube. So, my time was kind of spread throughout all that, and I also had a very shitty E-Machines PC with dial-up internet. So, that also plays a part here. It's hard to think of the order that I kind of approached everything, but I think, like, I guess I'll give a small shout out. You kind of hit the nail on the head with Pokemon Gold, and I equate that with Silver, because that was that for me. I did eventually get Gold, I think like a year or two later. But that was just me at that point being like, yeah, I got a Game Shark, what's up? Let's just mess with everything. But Silver was, like, very impactful for me. But that was, like, kind of the transition, I feel. I feel like that was kind of the start of me getting into, like, the Game Boy Advance coming out, which kind of eased me into the GameCube. So, like, I remember Mega Man Battle Network was very impressionable on me. I think that was one of my first games, if not the first game for my GBA. That's when I fully embraced A Link to the Past, because of that port that came with the Four Swords multiplayer game. I had a lot of fun with that. Mega Man Zero was also a big, impactful GBA game there. Because I was at this point, I was getting knee deep into the Mega Man franchise. I was getting knee deep into the Sonic franchise, ironically enough, and just kind of. And like the whole PC world. So like during the Game Boy transition into GameCube, I was obsessed with The Sims. I had like Sims 1, for those who weren't sure, but like I had like every expansion. I would download mods people have made, character skins or like furniture or what have you. I even had a program where you could put your face in the game. With like you had a digital camera to take a picture, scan the picture, clear out the background, boom, and no Photoshop, so everyone looked pink. But and I thought that was just amazing. Like I was just enthralled and just getting lost in all of that. Even
Dude, that technology is still the same today, by the way. Hold on, I have to chime in. You try to import a face into NBA 2K, looks exactly the same as what it did back then.
It looks worse when you have a beard and it doesn't know that you have a beard. I'll put it that way.
That's true.
You guys remember the picture? It tried to. Yeah.
Oh, it was horrifying. So yeah, I guess I should have given my age range for all this too, where it's impressionable. So let's see. I would say I was about 12, and then going into like about 18 years old for me. So I guess just my teenage, high school years more than anything is like the most of this. But Sims was kind of a little bit before that. Not too much was on my PC that I could run. It was pretty much that. I got into Jedi Outcast, Unreal Tournament was a big deal for me, and then I would try to play MMOs at 10 frames a second, but shout out to Anarchy Online. That was one where I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I just loved being there. When it came to the GameCube, the PS2 and Xbox kind of dipped in and out. And because also between this, some context, I would switch between living with parents, and so like when I was with my mom, it was just a GameCube. But then when I moved in with my dad, I had access to the PS2, and then the Xbox would be there whenever my brother came to visit my oldest, because he lived in he was like in Westminster or something for a while. So it was mostly PS2 and GameCube at this point, but yeah, so this was great because Sega and Nintendo weren't exactly rivals anymore at this point. Sega was having some issues. Nintendo decided to help out. And I thought it was just cool. Well, help out's a strong term, I know, but like, this was my way of playing Dreamcast games, essentially, without realizing that they were ports. Like, this was my way of getting to appreciate Sonic for all of its scope. Was through the GameCube, because the Sonic Mega Collection was one of the most inspirational games to me. Not so much with video games, but like with art. This is where like I didn't know what a furry was yet. I'm not a furry. I don't. But Sonic, I could see how you would identify it. Maybe I'm in denial. Who knows? But my favorite part was looking through all the comic book covers.
Oh, yes.
And just seeing that art style evolve, just seeing Sonic evolve throughout the years. And sometimes, I'd go in and I would play the games, I'd suck at them, come back, just enjoy the music, enjoy just looking at all the concept art. So that was how I started learning how to draw Sonic, was because of this Mega Collection. I would just have my sketchbook in front and just, for hours, just listen to that, chilling, peaceful music. So yeah, that will always be a part in my head. When it comes to the GameCube, there's also maybe this probably lost its spot in the game where I've synced the most hours into in my life, but Phantasy Star Online was another big part. Just the fact that could be an online game, but knowing me, for some reason, I'm weirdly appealed to playing MMO games as a single player game. I don't typically prefer it. It's just how it goes. but with Phantasy Star, it was cool because I like that it wasn't just online only. I love having an offline option. You can just be dungeon crawling by yourself with your created character, going through the story without having to worry about an online service or a monthly subscription or something like that. And then you could take that character on your memory card, go to a friend's house, or transfer that character, and then you two can co-op together, or up to 4 of you. But I would only prefer 2, so because of screen space. And widescreen wasn't exactly a thing yet. It was more just, still CRTs at this point. But I really, that was very impactful. A lot of the games I find fun around this time is mostly because of the versatility of things. I know a lot of it might be collections or ports, and I was just discovering emulation at this point. So a lot of things I used to play before, even when I was younger, I was still enjoying now because of that. So another thing to go with that. So between Phantasy Star, what was it? Smash Brothers Melee. That was the game, no matter what. I could play it every day, whether it's by myself, with friends. We could play that for hours, make a whole day out of it. Spend the whole morning, get food, come back, play that, get food again, come back, just stay up all night. That was it was a very endless feeling, and that was really fun. I know that's probably the free spot on a bingo board when it comes to GameCube. Because, I don't know a person who hasn't played Melee who had a GameCube. But the most exciting, upon receiving that system, though, was getting Animal Crossing. And this was thanks to Smash Brothers for having a trophy of KK Slider. Not knowing who the hell this dog was, but at this time, I had a pet dog, Crypto, who kind of looked like Toda KK or KK Slider. And I was just getting into actually playing guitar in real life, so it kind of it felt very sentimental to me to see that character and to enjoy that art style. And then America's commercials promoting the game that made it look like a reality TV show was also very appealing to me. So
I forgot about that.
Got to enjoy a lot of time in that, and also that was another way to play classic NES games upon just getting lost in all that. So yeah, so that's a Sonic, Phantasy Star, Animal Crossing with that, right? And there's a lot of other GameCube games in there that I could mention, but those 3 I think were the biggest. I know I talked about Gotcha Force a lot, and I do love that game, but that was kind of more towards the end of the GameCube's life by the time I got to that point. And the very end with that would be, I guess not the very end, but near it is when all the Zelda stuff kind of started to happen more. I started to like Zelda in the 64 time, but GameCube was kind of when everything fully clicked for me. With Wind Waker coming out, they re-released Ocarina of Time. They had the Zelda's collector's disc if you were subscribed to Nintendo Power. So it was fun to just go through it that way. And then I had to wait till the Wii to release to play Twilight Princess on a GameCube, but it was worth it. and now it's probably one of like the last games towards the end of this whole era for me. I think that kind of solidifies what the end of my era is. I think it might be Twilight Princess. But I want to highlight the other platforms that were very impactful. For Xbox, I mean, it was kind of basically just Halo. But, like, between Halo 1 and 2, like, 1 was great for what it was, but then 2 is when, like, things started to get a little serious, and, like, the neighborhood would have tournaments, or, like, just have people hanging out trying to see who the best was.
You learn teabagging in that game.
Yeah, like people I would normally never play video games with before. That was a way to, like, oh, alright, just going over to this dude's house I never really hung out with, but hey, we're all willing to play Halo. Like, that was a very rare thing to experience for me. But it was very impactful at the same time. Dynasty Warriors on PS2. I love the idea. It's kind of similar to Phantasy Star. This was like a game I enjoyed co-op, or just being like just two people just going after a whole army, just wiping them out, and just kicking ass. Like, nothing was greater than that. This is when I also got into fighting games a lot too. Like, Street Fighter started to get its real impact on me. Like, Capcom and Sega were starting to get their hooks into me, especially at this point. So, like, it took me a while, but Street Fighter, Third Strike, and Alpha 3 were kind of like not really my gateway, but for this era, it was the gateway to taking it more seriously, understanding how fighting games work, and wanting to learn, and getting blisters on my thumbs, like, every 2 weeks. Just from trying to do a Shoryuken to save my life. And, Guitar Hero. That was very, very impactful. The first game, it was fun, it was cool and exciting, but I think 2 is where, like, everything was starting to click, and it was starting to, like, to reach its peak, to where, like, I even entered a tournament, with one of my friends. My friend ended up winning the tournament, and moved on to, like, the finals at, like, Warped Tour, and, like, played on a stage and stuff. Like, that's how big that this game was getting, and, yeah, like, just enjoying video games in all different forms at this point. Like having, like, a cool peripheral, like with Guitar Hero or something, or being able to experience Xbox with basically strangers, or the GameCube in my own time. Getting to appreciate these different franchises that I didn't really fully dive into or get to appreciate before. And in between emulation, playing games that I could have never played before because of regional differences or what have you. Like, the internet was still kind of a fresh thing and still trying to figure itself out. And then within all that, there's just all these little nuances, and, like, we're not sure about video gaming as a culture at this point. It's still kind of like trying to get better accepted, I guess, with G4 being a thing. So, like, that whole culture, like, all this plays a part within each other, and it created such an atmosphere for me that I don't think could ever be replicated ever again.
Was that Guitar Hero tournament at Wrecker?
It was.
I think, was I there, or because Ben and I had a friend that was doing it, and I don't remember if I went or if I had to work that night, but I remember that happening fully. Yeah,
like, the first round for me, I won based off of a disqualification because the person didn't show up. So I moved on to the second round. And then
might have been me, dude. It might have been me signing up and not.
And then I beat the second person just by, like, a hair. And then I ended up having to verse my friend.
Oh.
And obviously I lost because
they went on
just
to
a
the
prodigy.
Warped Tour.
Yeah. But I'd rather lose to him than anyone else.
Was to jump back to the beginning of your golden era, was Mega Man Battle Network your first Mega Man?
No.
Okay.
Mega Man X was my first.
Okay.
But I didn't understand how Mega Man games worked. I didn't know how to really play them. I thought it was just a platformer. I didn't know there was, like, all right, yeah, there's a boss, but then, like, you get their powers. I didn't know how to use the powers. I didn't know about weaknesses or anything like
All right, but yeah, this seems like it might have been because you've always had an affinity for definitely Zero, but also the Battle Network stuff.
Even and I played Mega Man Legends on like the 64 or Mega Man 64 is what that one was called. But like, so I liked every version of Mega Man, but the original. Like all the spin-offs were like my favorites.
Yeah, it still tracks.
Yeah.
Do you either of you think that your golden era has changed through time?
Like, what do you mean?
I think, like, sitting down and thinking about it, this makes sense for me, 98 to 2001, but there's an argument that at some point it would have been, like, 92 to 95, or like, you know, just the sweet spot of the 16-bit era where I was still, like, right before we had 3D games. I could also see a time where I might have defined it similar to how Matt did, right? Like, something more like when I finally like got it right, but also still before video games had a $ for an S. You know what I mean? Like that era. I think whatever this games as a service era we're in now is far from anyone's golden age. Should never be. But yeah, I don't know. Has your era changed? Do you think?
I kind of keep in with the same idea that I had about, you know, just time and immersion and stuff like that. Like, I don't think I'd be into video games as much as I was if it wasn't for me being homeschooled through elementary school and having to... I played soccer and stuff, and I had friends, and I would go over to their house, like, afterwards, but, like, you know, being homeschooled, it was, like, 3 hours for me in my day. You know, it would start, like, at 10 and end at, like, 12, 1, you know, it fluctuated, but somewhere around there. You know, I had like 2 hours to kill before someone was even home, let alone they were allowed out for homework or whatever, or dinner, you know, whatever. And, you know, they don't necessarily show a lot of cartoons in the middle of the day when kids are in school. And I got a lot of, like, soap operas like Guiding Light, Bold and the Beautiful, and, you know, you can only see the same character cheat on their husband 5 times and get remarried to the same person 6 times before you just want to play Mario World for the 3rd time or something like that. Yeah, so, you know, I don't remember a lot of what I play. I mean, I have all the cartridges still in the Super Nintendo, but I don't have, like, the firm memories of, well, you know, just from a few years ago that I have. But, like, I know I played a lot then, and stuff was impactful then. I just don't remember, like, those key pivotal moments that I did, you know, back just a few years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, like, I mean, there's a lot of fond memories that I have with, like, playing between the NES or the Super Nintendo, and I could kind of rope those together. But even in like the 64, I could just have as its own era if I wanted to, like, to view it like that. But yeah, like all of them definitely have their highlights. But I don't think, I'm sure at one point the 64 was my golden era. But until I got into the one that I claimed to be my golden era, yeah, there's just so much there.
As we discover new titles through the podcast, are you finding new milestones or moments that complement your golden era, or maybe even change it?
I almost see this. Correct me if I'm my history, and I didn't maybe look into. My history just sucks. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like the Renaissance was the Renaissance because they just kind of remixed old art and made it modern, right? Kinda. What was like the big art movement that made the Renaissance the Renaissance? Before I say something stupid here in it.
I mean, Renaissance itself, isn't it? It's the French word for rebirth, right? So I think it's just like... It was just like when they
cared again.
I don't want to get. I think it's when they started, like, it was after all the bad crap, like, after, like, the Black Plague and after, like, just a bunch of garbage. I think that they were able to do art in a different way. It was like, there was, like, a new movement. I don't know.
All right, well, maybe, I don't want to, that seems a little too close to current events.
Yeah, right.
I don't want to use the word Renaissance then, but, like, it's almost like, the new perspective. I'm playing shit that, one, I missed. Two, I'm given, like, I'm using the list, for, not every week, but, like, some weeks I'm putting stuff on it that I want to play that I just never got to, either at my life or in recent history or something like Parasite Eve or something like 2 years ago. You play with it, you become obsessed with it. I just never sit myself down because it's a PlayStation 1 game that, I just never go back. So, get myself to sit down and just force myself to play some of the stuff that I missed that I wanted to. And then I've lost count of how many times I've come on ranking episodes when you asked me, what are your thoughts on this game going into it? And I said I had none because the first time I booted up was the first time I got exposure to it. So yeah, like, I don't know. Like I said, Renaissance, I feel like it's a strong word after what you just said, but it's, I don't know. I've been enlightened, I would say, since doing this little stint.
Well, not to be a goober, but if Renaissance means rebirth, we did sort of rebrand the free cheese and call it our rebirth right before you came on. We were in that phase. Like, we were feeling that because I think we knew that we needed to change the podcast too and get something different. So it is kind of fitting that you would naturally land on that word, right? No, I'm with you. I think there's a lot of stuff we've added that, yeah, like stuff I've wanted to play that is whatever. But yeah, I think also, like, I've been reaching back, whether it's for the podcast or whatever, but like filling in those gaps, like not having a GameCube, not having an Xbox, things that I can, a Dreamcast, those are all things I can do now, and I can start to fill in that stuff. So I wouldn't say I'm redefining my golden era, but I would say that I'm definitely like helping to strengthen it and like find other golden eras. Mark, what about you? We'll let you close us out.
Yeah, things kind of feel excuse me. Yeah, I'm not sure if eras for me exist anymore. Outside of that, like, there might be years, but it's not consistent. Like this year, I would consider maybe a golden year. There's just so many good games coming out in such a small window that it's a little surreal. And that's just between April and June. Like, we don't even know what the back half has yet. Maybe it could be crap. I don't know. But so far, like, this is pretty good. And those don't happen often. It's like every couple of years, it's like a weird cycle. Or it's like usually like one or two good games that really stand out a year. But now with me, there's like at least 5. And it's just crazy. But yeah, so like everything aside from that, everything just kind of feels like an extension at this point. It doesn't feel separate. Like, as a kid, you could kind of separate things by console and have your own experiences based on the age that you're in and playing those. Like, I separate my time with the Super Nintendo and NES different from when I played the 64. And I separate the 64 from when I got into the GameCube. But from the GameCube forward, I've kind of kept that same approach to everything. But of course, it's only heightened and gotten technically better. But it still feels like it's just a branch off of that, like that core. So it's like if my golden era is like the season 1, I feel like that series continued into like season 10 at this point or something,
Yeah,
it's
that's
at the
fair.
point where it's like, all right, things are kind of starting to get a little but there are some good nuggets in between that can still keep it going forward.
Yeah, like Damian Wayne on the Titans is not the best, but like Damian Wayne with Dick Grayson was pretty good.
Yeah.
I get it. Well, that's our golden era. Between
I have one fact I have to throw out there.
Yeah. Hit us with a fact.
Mark said Duke Nukem, and it got me wondering about a certain title. Duke Nukem Forever started development before your golden age, Joe, and came out at the beginning of mine. 1996 to 2011.
Wow. That's wild. Yeah.
I'm sure there's other games in development hell, but that's always the most notable one, I think.
That's
sure.
I think that does have the longest. I think Beyond Good and Evil 2 is getting close to beating it, but I think that is the one still.
I love that this is how we close out a golden era.
I know Duke Nukem Forever is a great game. I don't know what you're talking about.
Still have, it sucks. I don't have it shrink wrapped. I took it out of the shrink wrap just to look at the disc, but I've never played it. But I bought it for, what was it, $6 or something?
My roommate in college bought it out of a bargain bin, and it looked bad when he was playing it. And I played the first level, and I can't do this anymore, dude.
Yeah. I did it. It was clearance at a Best Buy, and it was $6, and $6 or $7. And I remember the guy ringing me up was like, "Are you sure?" And I said, "I'll take 2." Yeah, let us know your golden era. I'm curious to see what else people were playing out there, or if you align with Mark, Matt, or myself. And I hope everyone has a good rest of your day and a great week ahead as we wrap up the month of April. When we return next week in May, we will be kicking off our month's worth of podcasts covering the video game Disaster Report 4, brought to you by Granzella. So stay tuned for that one. It is quite a hoot. And I think that's all I got. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, listener, for listening. We'll see you next week.